Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome everyone to the John Schultz podcast. I'm really excited to be here, and we have an amazing guest, Susan Sly. So happy she's joining us today. She has an unbelievable story, unbelievable track record, and I'm very excited for everyone to hear it. But just a few things about her. She's the co-founder and co-CEO of Radius AI. So she's very into tech, and obviously that's where the whole world's going. So we all need to learn about that. She's the host of Raw and Real podcast, which is for startups and entrepreneurs achieving their dream, which I'm sure she's making people feel that as well. She's the founder of Agency 8, a digital agency. She's built 3 award-winning sales teams totaling $1.8 billion in sales. And obviously, to me, sales is the lifeline of any business. It doesn't get enough credit. So I love that. Author of 7 books. I can't believe you did that. Participated in 6 marathons and a pro Ironman triathlete. I'm getting tired just reading this, but I'm going to keep going. She's a mother of 5 and a philanthropist. And from what I know, the little time I know her, is a great person. And that's what matters the most. So I welcome you on the podcast.
Well, John, thanks so much for having me. And I want to acknowledge all of the listeners. I'm so excited for you to learn from John and hear his heart and all of the amazing people he's bringing on the show. And I want to celebrate you, John, because there are a lot of people who are out there and they're saying, I want to start a podcast. And here's a fun fact for everyone. 90% of podcasters have not produced a new episode in the last 90 days. So when I heard that, I was like, I am always one of those people. I want to be in the 10%. So kudos to you, my friend.
I love it. Well, listen, I'm not going to take that path. I'm going to commit to this. And I'm very excited. It's fun. Get to meet great people like you, and learn things. So I want to start out in a little bit of earlier in your life. I mean, I've read about your story and we're going to get to all the stuff that you do now, but I just, obviously you're doing an entrepreneur podcast, but like to do that, you sort of have to be one. And you started your first business venture at 11, selling Christmas ornaments. Yeah. And to me, I remember when I was younger, I used to do a lemonade stand. I mean, I did sort of what like any younger person could do, but Christmas ornaments, like how did that happen? And what made you even want to do that?
It's a great question. So any entrepreneur starts a business to solve a problem. And often that problem is their first business or their first few businesses are, it's a problem for themselves. So my problem was this. Christmas was coming. I wanted to buy gifts. So I go to my dad and I'm like, hey, can I have some money to buy Christmas gifts? He's like, no, you need to earn your own money. And I said, well, what should I do? He said, start a business. I'm like, well, I'm 11. What am I going to do? And he said, well, what are you good at? Turn into a profit. So I loved doing crafts. Like I was obsessed and I made all sorts of stuff. And so I thought, what if I make Christmas ornaments and I sell them? So my dad said, if you design a business plan, I will give you a startup loan. So this is my first experience with startup capital. And so I make my business plan. I need $40 for my startup capital. And I go and I make the Christmas ornaments. And I go and I think, oh, I'm a cute, little kid. People will just buy them. People rejected me. They're like, your ornaments are overpriced. They were $2.50. I'm like, oh my gosh. But I kept on going, sold all the ornaments, made $80, paid my dad back $40, and instead of spending the $40, I reinvested it in the second round, and then I went and turned that into $120 because I had learned. And so that was my very first business, and I got it in my blood, and I have not, I'm turning 50 this year, I have not looked back. So I'm a 40-year entrepreneur almost.
They say younger generation doesn't have financial literacy. I mean, unbelievable, 11 years old. I mean, it's just, I love it. It's awesome. All right. So obviously you're an entrepreneur. We know that. And you've continued to be one. So you were 24 and you bought a health club. First of all, why health club? I do know you like health and fitness, but obviously said you did Ironmans and marathons. So what made you gravitate towards that? It's also such a young age to start a new business.
Yeah, well, I was, my heart goes out to anyone who's ever struggled with their health. So when I was younger, by the time I was 10 years old, I was a women's size 14. And I remember going to the school nurse and we had to get weighed and talk about humiliating. And so I get on the scale, 140 pounds, 10, and she's like, wow, you weigh more than me.
Oh my God.
And I started crying and I ran out of there and I just said, I never want to go through this experience again. So I was like, any kid participating in PE and stuff. And I was always chosen last for everything and made fun of and bullied for my weight. And it was the Olympics this summer that I was 12 years old and I saw these girls running and I went, oh my gosh, I want to look like that. So the next day, John, I get up at 5 a.m. and I try and run a mile. And I think I made it like 50 yards. And I'm like, breathing. I'm like, and then I go back and the next day I'm like 100 yards and then 200 and so on. And so when I started to transform my body through exercise, I became very passionate. And so by the time I got to college, I left home when I was 15. I skipped 2 grades. I started college when I was 16. And how I put myself through college was teaching fitness classes back in the aerobics days with thong leotard. And I was a personal trainer. And so when I graduated from college, my first job out of college, I was a men's maximum security prison guard. And I wanted to work at the premier health club. Like I would work the night shift and then teach fitness in the day and then, sleep for a bit. And I wanted to work at the premier health club in the city and you had to go audition. So imagine like Flashdance style. So you've got your music and you go in there. And the first time I auditioned, the head instructor, Jane, she was like, you're just not on beat, go back and come back. I had to audition 3 times until I got hired. And when I got hired that day, I walk into the health club, I look up at the sign, and I'm like, someday I am going to own this health club. And so how that whole deal happened was the owner wanted to sell the health club. I was pregnant with my first daughter. I didn't have all the startup capital, and I negotiated the last $10,000 to buy the health club while I was in labor Sunday, March 2nd at 4:00 in the afternoon in between contractions.
Oh my God. Look at you. You just keep barreling through it. It's amazing. So, so would you do that again? Like if you could go back and would you choose that again?
Wow. No one in all the interviews I've ever done has ever asked me that question. It's interesting. I really try not to live my life with any regrets. And it doesn't mean there are things that I went, crap, if I was who I am now and I went back, would I be doing the same thing? And I think my answer to you is my 24-year-old self living who I was, running away from things, trying to run away from pain, using fitness as another form of an addiction. I probably would have made the same choice, but at this stage of the game, would I invest in a health club? Absolutely not. No.
All right, good. Listen, this podcast is about the myth to overnight success. And, most people look at everyone that is successful and they feel like, how am I ever going to get there? This thing was not linear. We were pivoting the whole way. And obviously your story shows that in dramatic fashion and in an amazing, successful fashion. So, in 2000, obviously, you said, and I've read that you said that was your growing moment, your growing year. Yeah. Is that something you'd like to discuss or?
Sure.
Okay.
I feel that, for all of the listeners, when those of us who are so privileged to be put in the place where at least one person is curious about the journey, why would we hold back? So I'll go back to 99 just very briefly. So in 1999, I was a pro-triathlete. I was guest lecturing at college. I was writing for magazines like Oxygen. In Canada, I was on television 5 days a week. I had a radio show. And I was doing so much because I was constantly trying to prove myself, and it became exhausting. And so my body, John, began to break down. And I went to my doctor and I said, something's wrong. And he was like, oh, you're just stressed. Why don't you go on vacation? So it's December 1999 and I go to Jamaica. I'm not drinking rum. I'm not going out and partying. I actually stayed in bed in the resort for 7 days. I couldn't get out of bed. And I came back and I had a little yellow Post-it and it said MRI. It said this. And I go into his office and I'm like, listen, Ross, you come to me when you want to know how to work out, what running shoes to buy, how to eat. You delivered my baby. That's all well and good. These are the tests I want. Make them happen. So I get all the tests, and it's Y2K now, John. So the world's going to end, right? It's all going to crash.
Exactly.
And so the world didn't end, but my world ended. So 13 days later, I get called into his office and he holds up a scan of my brain, and it's full. It looks like it's a fishbowl full of fish. And he said, Susan, these are lesions and you have progressive multiple sclerosis. And in a case like this, you will be in a wheelchair in 10 years and you will most likely be dead in 20. I was 27 years old with a 2-year-old.
Wow.
So I tell my staff, I just need a couple days. I go home and I'm researching on the internet. Now, everyone has to understand, I was like OG on the internet. I had my first online business in 1995 before most people were on the internet. Only 5% of the world was on the internet at that time. Searching the internet in 2000 was not like today. So depending on how old you are, some of you might remember, you'd type in something and then you'd wait. You'd be like, okay, and then the computer.
You mean the dial-up modem, right? The dial-up modem. Yep.
Yeah, and they make this noise like, right? So finally I'm waiting, and when I was waiting, this little pop-up comes up and it's like, hey baby, and I'm like, huh? No, we didn't, like back in those days, we weren't talking about computer viruses and things as much. And so I click on it and I see that it's a chat log of an affair of my partner. And so I've been given a death sentence. My marriage falls apart. And I own my part in it too. When you have two people who are together and they're both trying to prove themselves, that eventually is going to fall apart unless you heal that. And we didn't heal it. And 16 weeks later, I walk into my health club to go teach a fitness class on Good Friday. And there's a padlock on the door. We've been shut down for failure to pay taxes. So in a 16-week period, my marriage falls apart. I get diagnosed with a terminal illness. I lose my business, and I end up as a single mom to then a now 3-year-old on my brother-in-law's sofa, homeless.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. So how'd you get through that? I mean, my mother passed unfortunately 18 months ago. She was my rock and my inspiration, and she at a very young age was diagnosed with cancer. 17 lymph nodes. They gave her not much time. And I'll never forget this because I was only 15 years old and I literally felt the most helpless I've ever felt in my life. And she told me, the minute they told me is the minute I'm okay. And I'm going to go in the shower every night and I'm going to wash those cancer cells in the drain. She did all the stuff they said to do, but she survived. And she was basically in remission for 40 years after. And they said it was her attitude. And they used to bring her back to the hospital to actually talk to the younger doctors to say, it's not just about the medicine. It's also about your mindset. And it sounds like that's what you had to step into. Otherwise, obviously you wouldn't be, here right now doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm not an AI of myself. I'm not in a wheelchair. So yeah, Oprah once said that 1% doubt is 0% faith. And so I got down on my knees and I literally prayed to God. And I said, I have a vision in my heart to spend the rest of my life empowering women, empowering entrepreneurs, but I have to first empower myself. And you and I are both friends with Brandon Steiner. And although I gave up swearing a long time ago, I can be as in your face. The world doesn't need another fake personal development trainer. They don't need another fake sales trainer. People who have generated results are the people who really and truly are the ones. I mean, Jonathan has had an extensive career, and now he's taking his wisdom, bringing his friends like me to help to give to all of you. Until you have a result, you have not earned the right. And yes, you might have great things to say, but get some results on the board. And that's where I came from. So John, what I did, I said, listen, in order for me to earn the right to spend the rest of my life doing this, I have got to turn this around, because I was, bankrupt, sick, single mom, like every scarlet letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne's book, Scarlet Letter, every scarlet letter you could have, I was wearing it. So I said, you know what, I've got to turn my life around first. So I had to humble myself. The first thing I did was I got a job at Bally Total Fitness in management. And so there I was exhausted. I would be dropping things, shaking at times. I didn't tell anyone I was sick, only my friend Rick, who also had MS. So he was the only one. So suddenly I have a sales quota. And Lee Hillman, who at the time was the president of Bally's, like the top down, there were 444 clubs in the world. I'm sales manager at a club. I've got 54 staff and I've got a sales quota. And guess what? If month end was Sunday, you were staying until Sunday at close, 11 o'clock. So I took that in just a few short months. I took that to number one in the entire world. And we were selling in Canadian dollars. Our sales had to be converted to US dollars, so that we were already 35 cents on the dollar behind. So I had to outperform by 135 on the dollar every single time. We go to number one in the world. And Lee Hillman is like, Susan, what are you doing? And I said, I'm teaching people how to sell. So I developed this 8-step process, and I take all of my commissions and I started to work on my mindset. I read books by Tony Robbins. I'm listening to stuff by Jim Rohn. I'm reading, Think and Grow Rich. So to your point, like your mom, I'm working on my mindset. And then I decided to go the holistic route. So acupuncture, homeopathy, all of that stuff. I went back to school. I studied homeopathic medicine, and it took a long time, but eventually I began to turn things around. But I really feel it was my faith and my mindset. So 3 years after that, I started a business, and that business eventually went on to generate for the parent company over 1.7 billion in sales. And so today, actually, as of like today, this moment we're having this show, I've generated now over 2 billion in sales in 3 separate verticals. But that's where it all came from. I had to get my head on straight. And anyone listening, if you allow yourself to have negative thoughts, that is like building your dream home on rented land.
I love that. Listen, you defied odds. I mean, but you just, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't like a quick straight line, and you just you didn't quit, and you didn't quit on yourself, and obviously you had people around you supporting you, and which is tremendous. So good for you. So the marathon thing, I mean, I'm just curious, because I know people that like run a marathon, they're like, that's my bucket list. I did my marathon. Like, what's with the 6 marathon thing? Like, what made you keep doing that?
Yeah, it's more than 6. So actually, when I got diagnosed with MS, one of my first thoughts was, I've never run the Boston Marathon. And, now this doctor's saying you're going to be in a wheelchair. And I'm like, ah. So anyway, I started, I had been running for a long time. And when I could no longer ride my bike because I had vertigo so badly from the MS, I still kept on running. And sometimes I'd fall, and I still have, when I get to see you in person, I'll show you the scars on my knees. It's hilarious. So I'd be running along and I'd just fall. But anyway, I had these 2 friends, Jackie and Judy, and they were like, hey, do you want to run a marathon? And I'm like, well, my MS brain is like, well, Susan, you have MS. But the other part of my brain was like, screw it. Even if you fall, like, this is something you haven't done. You've done an Ironman, so you've done a marathon in the Ironman, but you've never just done a marathon, so let's train for it. So I trained to do my first marathon, and the funny thing was I missed qualifying for Boston by 7 minutes. And the girls were like, you missed qualifying for Boston by 7 minutes. I'm like, what? I'm freaking qualifying for Boston. So I enter another marathon, and this one goes from Niagara Falls, New York to Canada,
Yep.
and you run, So I'm like, I'm qualifying for Boston. It was freezing rain. It was so cold. I qualified for Boston, and that first Boston was 2007. So then I got pregnant for my youngest daughter, so I didn't go back to 11. So I did 07, 11, 12, and then 2013 was the bombing. I had just crossed the finish line, and it was such a weird day, John. Like, I can't even tell
So you were actually there.
Mhm.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, I survived the bombing. So
Oh wow.
yeah, so I crossed the finish line, and where you used to put your gear. So the race goes from Hopkinton and finishes in Copley Square. And so you would load your gear onto a school bus, and then you pick it up at the end. So they stopped doing that now, but after the bombing. But anyway, so I finished the race, and I go to the bus to get my bag, and it was just like there was this like weird energy in the air, and I can't even explain it. And I pull my phone out, and I go to text my husband, "Where are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm on Boylston at the other end." And I was about to say, "Let's meet at the finish," because we had friends in the race and want to see them finish. And this voice, as clearly as you and I are having the conversation, says, "Go to your hotel, go now." And I look around, and like, there's people around, but there's no one standing right beside me. So I'm like, okay, this is really weird. So I text Chris, I'm like, "Let's just meet in the hotel lobby." We were at the Westin, and the Westin overlooks the finish line. I get into the lobby. Suddenly, it's like, and there's this, like, the hotel's shaking. And, in my mind, because I had been law enforcement in Canada, I'm like, that's an IED. I know it is. And so the staff are like ushering us into the elevators. And so we go up to our room, which is the windows overlooking the finish, and the second bomb goes off. And then, and it was unbelievable.
Horrifying, I would think. Horrifying.
But if I hadn't heard that voice, which I personally believe is God, if I hadn't have heard that voice, I would have been at the finish exactly when the bomb went off.
You know what's, and like, whatever you believe it is, and I believe there's something way bigger than me as well. And we don't listen to it a lot. Like we think we control everything, and unfortunately we don't. And when you feel you need to always make that next move in your own head, right, rather than just feeling and listening, you sometimes wouldn't have a result like you did by getting the hell out of there at the right time. And, as I've gotten older, I've learned to listen to myself more and take a little deep breath before I react. And obviously, I think it's serving me well, which obviously I think it serves you well too in your business as well.
Well, let's talk about that just for a minute, because
yes.
Science shows that 70% of serotonin, which is our feel-good neurochemical, is produced in the gut. And so if 70% of our feel-good neurochemicals are produced in the gut, yet 78% of Americans complain about their gut. So they have indigestion, they have acid reflux, they have all these different things. How are we supposed to trust a toxic gut? That's my question.
Ooh, interesting.
So your gut was given to you. Whatever someone believes, higher power or not, our physiology states the gut was given to us to dictate how we feel. And if we are treating our bodies poorly, how can we listen to our gut? So when someone says, "I don't have that intuition, John, I don't," chances are it's because they're so disconnected from their gut. And the gut is always there. And that the bombing changed my life in so many ways. It was the reason I work in tech now and I don't work in health is because of that moment. And I realized that if I could be guided to something that saved my life, then I definitely had more to do. And I knew I had been playing small. I had become really complacent. I was bored in my career. And I knew that there was something more for me. That's why I didn't die that day.
Well, thank God, because that would be terrible. But so I agree. I think, the more we only have one body, we only have one mind, treat it well. And you think about it, like we were born to have all these negative thoughts, because in the olden days, you'd have to protect yourself from lions and whatever was around where you were. And I think in evolution, we've probably gotten better at that, but it's still the same principle. So, as much as you want to not have negative thoughts, they come in. So you got to sort of train yourself, which is, not an easy task, but it's like practice makes perfect, right?
Yeah. How does a muscle grow, right? So
Yep.
you go to the gym and you're working out. You have to take that muscle to near failure for it to grow. So it's the same thing with your brain. To your point, you've got to train it. So people are like, well, are you telling me you're positive all the time? No, but I want to share a quick story. So I've shared the stage with Tony Robbins on 2 occasions. I'm friends with his son, Jarek. Tony's an extraordinary person. So he tells a story about when in a lawsuit, he has to pay, I think it's $30 million. And he's like beside himself about this, right? And so he's like, in a wall kicking moment, he's having it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and he goes on. And then Johnny's finally like, how much time did I waste being angry? So he trained himself to take it down to 1 day, and then to half a day, and then 4 hours, and then, so on and so forth. So one of the things I've trained myself to do, because I have challenges too, there are, as a CEO of a tech company with a growing staff, sometimes there are people to let go. Sometimes potential investors are like, no. Only 2.5% of women-led pitches to VCs in tech are funded. That means 97.5%. Just by my gender, it's not likely to be funded. So I've got to fight harder, right? So all these different things. And yes, those wall kicking moments. So I used to take myself out of the game for a long period of time and feel sorry for myself and go into victim. And now what I've done is I've trained myself. So if I'm having that moment, it's to step back and say, challenging myself, yeah, I'm ticked off about it, but can I just allow this feeling for like 5 minutes as opposed to wasting a whole day?
Well, I think as we've gotten older, we're both, older. I'm in my 50s as well. I've learned that most of the time, not most of the time, I've learned that every single time that something did not go the right way, it was for my benefit, not for my detriment. And I've actually started writing, I have a journal on it, because to limit the time I would worry about it, when it didn't go my way, I'd write it down, right? And then when it finally came to where it was the moment this would not have happened if that didn't happen, I wrote the second sentence down, and I could go back and constantly read all those times. And it's been years now, and I can't really remember one that something didn't happen that was better. Even it didn't feel good, but I think life, is probably mostly for you, not against you, if you want to believe that. And that sort of was my little tactic, and I still use it today. And obviously, I think limiting, that angst is so important, because it just doesn't serve you. It's no one else is going to help you with that state except yourself. There's nothing that can help you. So moving on, I'm a tech fanatic. I've always loved tech. I used to have the phone that you carried on your shoulder. That's giving away my age a little bit, where you literally had to carry it. Laptops were like 100 pounds. So I've been in tech and always had the first pump. I'm a gadget guy and a tech guy. So I love tech. I'm also invested in many early stage startups. So this AI thing, obviously you went from creating this sales, this amazing sales program. And obviously in my mind, like we said before, sales is such an important thing. But now you're in this sort of next wave of where we're all thinking and going, not really completely sure of what it means. And, AI is a big word, big data, AI. I think what the pandemic did, which was great, was force us all to the cloud, even small companies, because you can't have AI without data. And, so you needed that push. So tell me about what you're doing in this, and it just sounds exciting, right? And this is something newer, right? So yeah.
Well, it's new old, right? So in when I was in university, and it was back in the early 90s. So I was coding in the 80s because my same father who told me start a business, I was like, Dad, I want a video game. And he's like, no, code one yourself. So I had to learn how to code. So I did. I taught myself how to code. And then in the 90s, 90, 91, 92, I was a research assistant, and we were working on early facial recognition technology. And what we were doing, we were using it to catch serial sex offenders. And so we were quantifying crime scenes. And if you are like going, what the heck is she talking about? So we were assigning numerical values to certain things that were happening at a crime scene. And what our technology allowed for was when there had been a heinous crime against a woman, instead of having a potential, looking at thousands of people who might have committed this crime against her, it would help law enforcement narrow the search. And an iteration of our software ended up being used at Quantico. So let's fast forward. So 2016, I just had a new book come out. I'm doing all these speaking events, and I go to Africa because my oldest daughter, Maggie, is from there. And I go to Africa, and normally I take a Z-Pack with me. I take like all the stuff, like oil of oregano, you name it, I've got it. Like I'm prepared. But she was giving birth and the baby was breech. And so I was in a speaking event in Ohio, and I literally fly to Jersey, and I fly like from Newark to Frankfurt, and then, go to Ethiopia and then Malawi. And so I get there, and the baby ended up being fine, and a little girl, we named her Honor.
Thank God.
And but I don't even know what I ate or whatever, but I came back, Jonathan, and I knew something was wrong. And it got to the point where there I was again. I was in bed. I was weak. I couldn't even, I would crawl out of my bed on my bedroom floor just to get to the restroom. And the first doctor said, it's all in your head. The second doctor's like, it's just PMS. I'm like, no, this is not PMS. My favorite one was this one doctor hands me a personal development book. I'm like, I do training events with Tony Robbins. This is not that. To make a long story short, by the grace of God, I ended up seeing a tropical disease specialist in New York, and I was diagnosed with an amoeba, and it was shutting down my organs. And had I gone 3 more months, I would have died.
Oh my God.
So for some reason, my moments tend to be like, you almost die. So now we're going to have a life pivot, right? So there I am in 2016, and I'm like, if I had died, what is it that I wouldn't have done? Where would I have felt unfulfilled? And I want everyone listening to really ask themselves that question. If you died right now, as morbid as that is, what would be left unfulfilled for you? And so for me, it was technology.
Wow.
Because I had coded. I was an early OG online seller, but I had put all that stuff to the side. And so I started to get back into technology, first with digital marketing and building funnels and building little websites and, that kind of stuff in my spare time. And then I went from that to, I started to architect this piece of tech that I wanted to build. Through that process, I met this guy who, he and his partner, they had this concept for an AI company. They were doing some early stuff with smart cities and multi-camera tracking and stuff like that. And he's like, could you help us raise money? I'm like, raising money is easy. So he said, well, how much do you want? And I said, don't give me anything. If I help you raise the money, you can decide what I'm worth. So I came in and I helped them raise the money, and I started as the chief marketing officer, and then I became the president, and then they wanted me to be co-CEO. So I said, I'd love to be co-CEO. I don't want to be CEO. So I get to work with the most amazing person. His name's Aykut, and we really balance each other out.
That's
and
great.
So we did 7.1 million in our friends and family round, and then we just opened a pre-A round. We're at revenue. We're covering our burn. We're embarking on a almost 1,000 location deployment here in the United States.
What's it focused on?
So we do AI at the edge. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there's cloud compute and then there's edge compute. So
Edge computing, right? Which, yeah, I think with like 5G actually will enable that, I think, to be a better solution today, right? Is that why it sort of hasn't been focused on, or no?
Well, with video, when you're talking about processing, so the amount of video we would process at, say, a 5,000 square foot location would be 20 cameras going 24/7. So the amount of video, if you think about it, that level of processing
Up to the cloud, you mean? To go up to the cloud, right? Exactly. Okay.
To process that at the cloud, in current cloud costs would be, approximately $25,000 a month. So edge compute, and Andrea Hewell, who's become a great friend, she is the head of AI North America for Lenovo. So Andrea says that edge compute will be 4 times that of cloud compute by 2025. It's less expensive, it's more secure, it's processed on-prem. So we do computer vision integrating with existing security cameras at the edge, doing retail analytics for our customers with human-centric AI. So what I mean by that is we don't do facial recognition, we do advanced real-time analytics, real-time nudges, and we empower employees. So we essentially take that space and create an ambient intelligence.
Wow. And it's mostly retail right now for traffic or airports, or is it?
No, we focus on retail. We have done projects in healthcare as well. And it's not that healthcare isn't on our roadmap, but in this year, we are so retail focused because we are doing this, we're under contract to do this deployment, which is great. And we know, you and I both know 90% of tech startups fail. Yeah. So we feel very blessed, to be covering our burn, to be at revenue. So we're doing a small round right now, and then we're going to do our growth round coming up, and everyone can look at our Crunchbase profile. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, but I'm so excited about this round because it's an opportunity, and let's talk about investment for a minute. Where people make a lot of money in investments is when they're invited to someone's dinner party to look at an idea on a napkin. Right? And since you're a tech investor, you get that. But because there's such a high failure rate in the United States, we have something called SAFE agreements, which means, or ISQs, you've got to be a qualified investor because you have to know the risks. But for our early investors, the value of their investment has already had a significant multiplier. And this will be our last round that will just be, a productization round before the big growth round. So I'm excited. The way I feel, John, I feel sorry for the people not investing with us.
So let me ask you questions. We're going to have a lot of real estate people listen to this, hopefully. What is the most important value prop for this for what you're doing now? Like what are your customers, what do they actually feel like they're getting that's real, ROI or whatever they're measuring it to be?
Yeah, let's start with your commercial people, and then I'll go to the residential people. So I have a lot of friends in real estate, and I'm by no means an expert, but I want to talk about how this applies and where AI is going. So we at Radius, we just took out a lease on a new commercial property. So we go and it's the property's being retrofitted, right? So it looks like nothing. And they give me some glasses, like some Oculus style glasses. And they're like, here, okay. And this thing, and you essentially point it and it's like, poof, now you're in what's going to be the gym, and poof, now you're in what's going to be the bar, and blah, blah, blah. So I literally do a tour in VR for this space, right? Yep. And so we see that's where commercial is going. That's where residential is going. We see that VR technology, which isn't quite there yet, still requires the clunky glasses. Eventually, you won't need them to get to where you want to go. And that's why I'm so excited, for Apple and what they're going to build with their technology.
The glasses, yeah.
Yeah, initially it'll be glasses, but then we will get into that world in other ways. It will eventually be, say, a contact lens. It might be even other technology that's enabled through your phone and different things like that. So in real estate, we're seeing that, as commercial or residential, your job is to paint a picture of possibility for that potential person who's leasing, who's buying, who's whatever. And so we're seeing a lot of realtors using VR now. Okay, so let's talk about AI. So AI takes any space and makes it a smart space. Okay, so that's the first thing I want everyone to understand. So if your job is to essentially put people in spaces they love, AI can make them love them even more. So on the commercial side, some of the things we do with retail, and we're talking about high throughput retail. So think about fast food, think about convenience. What we do are things like queue analytics. We can identify who's the primary payer, who's the companion. Again, without using facial recognition, we can identify if a customer caused a delay or if the cashier caused the delay, how many people are in the store, where they're looking, what products they picked up. Let me give you an example. They looked at Pepsi for 5 seconds, but they bought Coke. Pepsi doesn't know this.
So this is all through cameras, though, not facial recognition. And AI is creating all these analytics, which is fascinating. So it's more retailers wanting this product, right? Not owners. So retailers, which, is obviously interesting, I guess, so they could see more what's happening real time in their space. Maybe they see people looking at this product more, have more on that shelf. Have they seen the ability to actually churn out more product and create an ROI on this product?
Yeah. So, it helps them optimize their space. So let's go back to real estate for a minute. Imagine being able to use our technology and helping the people who are leasing your space, because in commercial, you want those long leases and you want those A tenants, right? So thinking about if that A tenant, like going to shopping malls as an example. So we can track the journey of people, that customer journey. So how many people walked by that store but didn't go in? How many people did go in but didn't buy anything? That is, you can do that by watching cameras, but it is very tough to watch them all the time. So with our technology, we can say, hey, John, okay, you're renting. You have this premium space, you want to rent it to, whatever XYZ premier retailer, that you could be able to give them this analytics package and say, okay, we know previous person that was renting the space, X percentage of people came in the store, X percentage bought, whatever you could disclose with that data. But that's the power of creating real-time ambient intelligence, and also being able to nudge the salespeople and say, hey, this person's been standing over there for 10 minutes and no one's helped them. Why don't you go help them? So our focus with human-centric AI is to come alongside the employees and help them. And so that's the vision for our company, and we're loving it.
Well, good for you. So this has been amazing. Obviously, it just proves that success is not overnight, and it comes in lots of ways and places and cool things that we learn over our lives. And obviously I want people to learn more about you. So what's your podcast, they can follow you there. LinkedIn, just Susan Sly.
Yep, at Susan Sly. I would say go to my website, susansly.com. If you're listening and you're a woman and you've always thought about, doing a tech startup, my new incubator is starting. It's called FemBoss. And, I want women to apply. And so we're going to mentor them through the process. And we've got an amazing partnership with 10X. And so we're going to teach you, how to fundraise, how to pitch, get your technology out to the market. And the vision of the team that I'm partnered with is to launch 10,000 tech startups. So in the next 10 years, successful tech startups. So I'm so excited about that. So go to susansly.com. That's the best hub. And my show, Raw and Real Entrepreneurship. John is going to be on my show, but I've had Dave Asprey on the show. I've had Jesse Itzler on the show. I've had Emily Hochman, top 30 under 30 Forbes. My gosh, so many amazing entrepreneurs. John Lee Dumas has been on my show. So we're on almost episode 300. So check that out. I'd love to have everyone listen in.
Well, thank you so much. And again, very grateful that you've come on. I've learned a lot, and I'm excited for everyone to hear this. They're going to enjoy it immensely. So there we go. So take care.
Thanks for having me.